Back in August, it was announced that the actor James Franco had been cast to play Fidel Castro in an upcoming film. As Axios reported at the time, the casting decision sparked anger. Many on the left accused Franco of participating in whitewashing. The Washington Post ran an article claiming that the incident highlights the alleged ongoing problem of Latino exclusion in Hollywood. Fellow actor John Leguizamo blasted the casting as appropriation, called for a boycott. Many others agreed that Franco should not be allowed to appropriate a brutal dictator from Latinos. He may be a mass-murdering psychopath, but he's their mass-murdering psychopath, damn it. It didn't matter that Franco actually looks a lot like Fidel Castro. It also didn't matter that Franco and Castro are not that far apart ethnically. Castro's father was from Spain, while Franco's grandfather is from Portugal. It also, of course, didn't matter that the job of an actor is to act, that is, to pretend to be something that you are not. None of that matters in such cases. All that matters is that Franco is white, and white people must stay in their acting lane. Now, by the way, John Leguizamo was born in Colombia, but his first prominent role in Hollywood was portraying the Nintendo character Luigi, who is an Italian plumber, according to the Nintendo canon. That doesn't matter either, though, as we'll cover in a moment. Now, over the years, there have been many outrages and controversies stemming from instances of alleged whitewashing. The anger is no less palpable when the role in question is a fictional character. In 2017, a British actor was forced to drop out of a Hellboy film because the character he was supposed to play was Japanese in the original comic. A few years before that, Emma Stone's casting as an Asian woman in a romantic comedy provoked so much wrath from the left that the director of the film had to issue a written apology for the film he directed. And Stone herself has since apologized for her participation in the project. That same year, Rooney Mara had to grovel and beg for forgiveness after starring as Tiger Lily in a Peter Pan adaptation. The left declared that the fictional character is supposed to be Native American. Rooney Mara is not. And she agreed. And now she says that she's haunted by guilt because of portraying that character in the film. The outrage extends into the cartoon realm as well, where last year, Hank Azaria famously apologized and announced that he was stepping away from his role as Apu in The Simpsons on the basis that he shouldn't be voicing a character of Indian descent. In fact, the show's producers have since said that no...
Wasn't that specific one less about a white person voicing an Indian character than it was a white person voicing an Indian character whose whole purpose in the show was to just be an Indian stereotype? Like there was nothing about his character that brought any value to the show other than to just be stereotypically Indian. So I don't know much about some of these other ones, but that one I think is a mischaracterization of what
white voice actors will be used for any characters from other ethnic backgrounds from now on. The determination to root out all cases of whitewashing, quote unquote, or suspected whitewashing or potential whitewashing is so absolute that the live-action remake of Aladdin in 2019 came under fire because the brown actress who played Jasmine was not brown enough. And she wasn't white, but she appeared to be kind of white adjacent, and that was very disturbing. A Screen Rant article at the time said that Aladdin's whitewashing had damaged its box office potential. The writer apparently convinced that the average moviegoer shares her race-obsessed neurosis. Now, it may then come as a surprise, to the most naive among us anyway, that the very same media which complains bitterly about whites in traditionally non-white roles, and the very same leftists who treat the whitening of non-white characters as literal genocide, and all the people who've taken this issue so seriously as to cause many white Hollywood actors to drop out of films and fall to their knees in apology, would all this week be so excited about the release of the first trailer for Disney's upcoming Little Mermaid live-action copy and paste job? Now, everything is mostly the same in the remake, as always. It's like shot for shot, exactly the same, except that the Little Mermaid herself, a pale redhead in the cartoon version, has been recast as a black woman, though still with red hair somehow. Now, this is part of a growing trend. As the anger about whitewashing increases, so in equal proportion does the demand for what we must in the reverse call blackwashing. A viral post on Twitter declares rapturously, "A black Cinderella, a black Belle on Broadway, a black Cinderella on Broadway, and now a black Ariel. The black girls are truly winning." Much to the left's approval, the black girls are winning, quote unquote, in historical retellings too. Last year, a black woman was cast as Anne Boleyn, the 16th century Queen of England, in an upcoming miniseries. Netflix currently features a show starring a black woman as a Viking warrior. Many other examples come to mind, too many to count. They even fired Jake from State Farm and replaced him with a black version. And then there are the examples yet to be. For instance, there's still a major push to find somebody other than a white man to fill James Bond's shoes in the next installment. Now, in all of these cases, two things are guaranteed. Or actually more than two, a few things. When a black actor plays a traditionally white role, portraying either a fictional character or a historical figure, the media, the left, and Hollywood itself will celebrate the move as pioneering and courageous and important, along with all the other requisite superlatives. The other guarantee is that any criticism of the casting decision, even and especially criticism that simply adopts the same logic as the left applies to so-called whitewashing, will be slammed as racist. The Daily Beast today has an article documenting what it calls the racist backlash to the Black Little Mermaid, declaring this backlash to be out of control. The racism is out of control, they say. Then you click on the article, and in the article, they provide a few tweets from random accounts complaining that the underwater scenes don't look realistic. So the Daily Beast article about racist backlash contains no racist backlash, or even backlash that vaguely mentions race. They simply determined that the criticism of the film's bad CGI is really racially motivated. It's a dog whistle, as they like to say. That's the third guarantee, that when a film casts a black actor in a white role, any criticism of the film, any criticism, even criticism that makes no mention of race, is racist. Which is why you can't criticize the new Lord of the Rings series or the Game of Thrones prequel without revealing yourself to be a member of the KKK. In such situations, the left also likes to employ its favorite sleight of hand trick that we talk about all the time on this show. This is something that they will surely use in response to this very monologue you're listening to right now, when Media Matters clips it and posts it to Twitter with a caption like, "Daily Wire host launches into racist tirade about Black Little Mermaid." Guaranteed they're going to do that. And when they do, the left is going to respond to it by scoffing and saying, well, why do you care so much? It's just a movie about a mermaid. It's just a mini-series about the Queen of England. It's just a show about a Viking. It's just entertainment. Why are you even talking about this? Aren't there more important issues? But of course, they themselves have made exceedingly clear that racial accuracy in entertainment, whether fictional or historical, is extremely important to them. They've been saying this for years. That's why they go into spasms of rage whenever a character is judged not black or brown enough. It's why they would literally riot and start killing people if somebody rebooted Tyler Perry's Medea series, except with Bob Odenkirk dressed in drag for the title role. A similar reaction would be expected if the live-action remake of The Princess and the Frog featured like Kristen Stewart as Tatiana. And of course, a biopic about, say, Frederick Douglass with Tom Hanks as the lead would result in entire cities burning down in flames. All of these things would be called, as less egregious examples have been called, black erasure. So does that not mean, by their own categorization, that the reverse is white erasure? And if they can complain about black erasure, then why can't we complain about white erasure? Any kind of erasure on racial grounds sounds bad to me. Well, no, they say. It's different in the reverse. It's just different. It always is, right? And that's why all of this matters. Now, on its own,
he was so close to engaging with it. He was so close to engaging with the actual criticism. Oh, he almost got there.
The race of an actor portraying a fictional character or even a historical character doesn't matter. Makes no difference, right? That's exactly the point that many of us have insisted on for years when the left started making this an issue. For years, we said, it's not an issue, who cares? And there was a time when that was the case. It wasn't an issue. Nobody really cared about it. Morgan Freeman's character in Shawshank Redemption is actually supposed to be an Irish guy with red hair. That's why the character is named Red. But nobody complained because Freeman was brilliant in the role. He single-handedly made that film the classic that it is. And also, back in the early 90s, people weren't obsessing as much about the racial dynamics in Hollywood films. There was nothing pointed or political about giving the role to Freeman. Contrary to now, when the diversification, quote unquote, of a story is always very clearly pointed and political. Back then, he was just the best man for the job. Everyone loves his character now, and that's all that needs to be said. Many of us have clung to that attitude today, which again, in a vacuum makes sense. But we're not in a vacuum. Unfortunately, we live now in a culture governed by blatant racial double standards. The rightness or wrongness of an act, the seriousness or unseriousness of an issue, the legitimacy or illegitimacy of a complaint, even the mutability or immutability of a cartoon character's race are all judged on racial grounds. Based on skin color, we are told what our opinions are allowed to be and what sorts of things we are allowed to care about. And if you're white, then there's going to be a whole list of things that every other group of people can care about, but which you would be insane, stupid, petty, and racist to care about yourself. Entire lists of priorities which, due to your skin pigmentation, are off limits for you. You are not allowed to care about it, they say. We're supposed to just accept a rule which says, having a white actor play Black Panther is horribly racist, but it's also horribly racist to complain about a black actor playing The Little Mermaid. But that rule is indefensible and hypocritical in the extreme. And we all...
Okay, that's specific. There's 40 seconds left, and then I'll go on my long tirade. But that specific example, he has to know is disingenuous because not the entire, but a really large part of the character of Black Panther is inherently it is a political one from the start, and that he's a hero from Africa, dealing with this hypothetical world in which this country in Africa is exposed to incredible technology and resources, and then the ethical dilemma of what to do about the oppressed black class around the world arises from it. It's inherently racial, whereas the Little Mermaid's character is not. So whatever.
All know it. And yet we're supposed to just acquiesce to it. That's what all this is about in the end. It's not about the movies. I don't even watch any of these movies. On their own, I don't care about them. I do care about the racial double standard, which we are being conditioned to accept. Because another word for racial double standard is racism. This is all racist. And that's why it matters. Well, if you...
Okay, we got through the whole thing there. I am not familiar with some of the specific examples he talked about there, like Emma Stone and whatever movie it was. Some of these he cites, maybe I'm out of touch, but some of these he cites as like examples of like complete and utter outrage, and I feel like I hadn't heard of like half of them. And I'm pretty terminally online. So I might just be slightly over-exaggerating the public response to some of this stuff. But anyways, on a more macro level, right, there's 2 points I want to make on this conversation because I feel like it's moving nowhere. It's the same conversation, and it has been for a few years now, and it's moving nowhere because both sides won't make a concession on something that they think loses them the argument or something like that. Particularly on the left, right? I want to say this first as someone who is on the left. We hesitate to say and publicly be public about the fact that our views on this issue of representation in media is a double standard. Like, we need to just say it, own it, so that they can't just keep running this same talking point over and over again. They make a 5 to 15 minute video saying, hey, look at the world of Hollywood and liberals where they care about getting more black representation in media, and at the same time, they seem to care about getting less white representation in media. And so they freak out when something like the James Franco incident happens. Or a character I remember people being upset by was what is she called? Sorceress Supreme or something from Doctor Strange. Is that her that might totally not be her name. But the character that like teaches Doctor Strange how to do magic, or whatever, and she's a character from Nepal. So I think people were upset that they casted an English actress to play her. So the left does get mad at these things, and the in a vacuum, to use his language, like, yes, this is a double standard. And so I wish the left would just, what I wish is that the left would say, yes, this is a double standard, but here's why the double standard is justified, and go from there, and then make your argument. Because the left's argument really is not about avoiding double standards when it comes to this topic of representation in media. The left's argument is much more about the historical nature of the fact that white actors, and particularly when it comes to the world of movies, right? White actors have been the main characters disproportionately throughout the vast history of Hollywood. And when there were black actors, they were used for very specific roles, particularly early on in media. They were not main characters. They were not our heroes. And you began to see a shift away from this with the Morgan Freemans of the world, obviously. But the point was still such that, as a whole, that the representation was not equal, and that there weren't enough black superheroes, and there weren't enough, on and on we go. We know that whole shtick. We know where that argument's going about representation, right? So the left's argument really is not about one saying, well, we're trying to avoid a double standard here, because it is, in the short term, it sort of is a promotion of a double standard. So I wish we would own that, get it out of the way, and say, yeah, this is a double standard insofar as how we frame it, and here's why that's okay, right? And then move on from there. And then on the right, like, I wish they would just, like, none of the Daily Wire types will really engage with what the more thought out reasons are for paying so much attention to this in the world of media and Hollywood, and for the way we talk about it, and for sort of the obsession over representation in media. They're not engaging honestly, and I think they're not engaging honestly because they know that when they start to engage honestly, at bare minimum, this clear path they've laid out for themselves as being the clear moral victors goes away pretty fast. It gets really blurry and really gray. And so the argument regarding this kind of thing, right, is that in a country where systemic and historical racism are not debatable, those are at even conservatives, even conservatives, of course, will acknowledge that historical racism exists in this country, right? When you look at the history of media and the way characters have been portrayed and presented, and who are treated as Hollywood's biggest stars and the most attractive people in Hollywood, and on and on and on we go, there's no way around the fact that this is a majority white world, and has been for much of its history. And so when you've got counterexamples to this, right, with someone like a Pocahontas, the reason she's not white is because the story takes place in such a time where she is the Native American who gets basically saved by the white colonial guy, and they like fall in love or whatever, right? So there's a criticism there that's not about the fact that it's not ignoring the fact that it's good to have a non-white princess in Disney. It's just like, well, why can't we just have a non-white princess who's not being saved by a white colonial? Like that is, again, it's blurring the lines insofar as how dangerous and fucked up and evil the history of colonialism is in this country, and what exactly happened when white Europeans got here. So it blurs the lines for kids. There's no way around the fact that it portrays that issue without going into its full depth, because the reality is that of course of course there were good actors on both sides. There always are, right? But the reality of it is, and the thing that we do not get taught in schools as kids, the way it's not framed to us is that like the white people were in the wrong here. That framing never happens. Um, it's sort of this awkward thing, right? Like, well, we're the white people, but we were the ones in the wrong. So saying it out loud is sort of weird. And how do you tell kids? It's a tricky conversation. Doesn't mean it's a conversation that doesn't need to be had, right? And then when it comes to Jasmine in Aladdin, right? The context of the story is such that, of course, it wouldn't make sense to have a white character play her role, which is great. And we should have more princesses and more princes and yada yada yada, who are representative of different cultures, and that is a good thing. And I don't know how you could argue against it, because one of the arguments that the right wing take on this seems to rely upon is that there's like this limited number of potential films to be made. Like there's an infinite number of potential films and stories to be told, and framing it such that more non-white equals less white is not true. There's still in this world of like everything's racialized and every Hollywood movie is so goddamn political. And like whatever the criticism is, right? Like there's still a fuck ton of movies which star white characters, aren't right? Right, Matt? Like white people aren't going anywhere in the world of media. The point is just that like maybe it shouldn't just be them. And so then comes the nuanced part, the tricky part of the conversation, which is that given the nature of the fact that when we look back at our history and when the stories of Cinderella and Little Mermaid and Snow White and all these characters were coming into fruition, the discussion and the understanding of the race problem and racism in the United States was different than it is today. And so the point is, the argument is that yes, this is a double standard. We should promote more and more characters, which something that is not like an innate characteristic of that character is the race, right? With something like a Little Mermaid, like it doesn't fucking matter for the point of the story what Little Mermaid looks like, right? It's different than the someone playing a queen who's black. Like I kind of like I understand that more. Like if you want to have that conversation or about a Viking who's black, like okay, like maybe we can have that conversation, but it's entirely different than the Little Mermaid and the Cinderellas and yada yada yada, where there's no, it doesn't matter for the purpose of the story. But given when those characters originated and the time that they originated from, and the fact that equal representation, or I shouldn't say equal, I should say proportional representation, wasn't something that was being discussed or talked about, and it certainly wasn't happening. Well, now we've got to try and make up for it, because these stories aren't going anywhere. They dominate the culture. And when we do remakes of stories, when we tell stories again, it's okay to revise them to keep up with the ethics of the times. And the other thing that's going on here, right, is it's like we're talking about this as if this is like the definitive end to the Little Mermaid saga. Like there's no option to tell the story again with a non-black character. Like there's so many directions to go with this. It's like we're going to tell this story a bajillion frickin' times. You know, we know the way Hollywood works. If a story sells, they're going to just keep going and going and going and going and going. And so there's a future for a bunch of different ways of representing these characters. And the reality is such that, yeah, we need to, this is a big thing for what I don't know how you can argue against are good reasons or an accurate depiction of just the relevant history, right? So I wish the right would engage with this on a level a little bit more deep than just saying, oh, the left, they don't realize they're doing a double standard and double standard racism. And the much more nuanced take from the left on anything to do with race is that, yeah, given the nature of the fact, just the nature of the history of white on black oppression in the United States, acting as if we can fix it by magically just flipping a switch and pretending to be colorblind in a world where systemic racialized problems and institutions already exist isn't going to fix the problem. If you disagree with that, then say why you disagree with it. Argue with us on the terms that we're arguing. Because left thinkers, people who spend time really thinking about this in detail, they're not trying to get up there in front of the microphone and say that this is how we judge people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. Like, no, it's an argument based on the relevant context of the world around us. It is an argument based on the existence of systemic and structural racism around us. And I would go so far as to say that one of the reasons that the right loves to talk about this issue is because it's one step removed from the actual stuff going on around us. Right? When we talk about structural and systemic racism on the left today, in the broader context, in the abstract, we're not talking about Hollywood and representation. We all think it matters, and it's good, and it's important to think about, but it's not when we're asking our politicians how they're going to deal with structural and systemic racism, this is not what we're asking them about. But right-wingers know that getting into the facts of that issue is a losing battle for them. So they shift. They shift to make this about a Hollywood thing when they themselves are very clear in saying, like, no one fucking, like, they proudly scream to the world that they don't give a shit about Hollywood. And people who are really spend a lot of time thinking about and working on the issues of systemic racism don't really give that much of a flying fuck about the status of Hollywood. Right? This is it's not to say that it's not an issue. It's just that it's not the main issue. And you're portraying this as if it's like the main conquest of the left and the politicians. And this is like what everyone politically on the left is so obsessed with. That's like, no, dude, you're making us obsessed with it by talking about it, by obsessing over it, by deflecting from it. So we need to do on the left, like this is a tough job, people, but we got to do it. We got to, on the one hand, show them that their argument is still ignoring the context of the world around us. And number two, always bring the conversation back to where they don't want to go, which is that, like, look, this is about a much broader issue, and this isn't the main concern at the end of the day. Things like policing, right, and the prison industrial complex, and access to education and healthcare, and on 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 we go. Those are the real issues here. But those are the things that we really are talking about on a political level. This is just some, like, right-wing, wealthy culture wars shit that non-wealthy people don't really give a shit about.